Good afternoon. We're a molecular diagnostics company based in Manchester in the UK, and our mission is to drive infectious disease diagnosis out of hospitals and laboratories and as close to the patient as possible and into the community setting, with a vision to improve the equity of access for healthcare and diagnostic information in infectious diseases in healthcare in general. As a quick intro to what we've done so far and what our current achievements are, to date we've raised £1.8 million in VC funding and around 330,000 in grant funding from Innovate UK, NHS, etc. for validation against our initial technology. This has allowed us to build a really strong platform at our base in Manchester with a team of 10 scientists and a sort of deeply experienced board in medtech delivery of 5. We filed a couple of patents related to our core technology related to our molecular primer sets, which I'll describe in a moment, and we've carried out initial clinical work on those alongside also developing an initial prototype. But what's the real problem? Why do we need better or more accessible diagnostics? In terms of the community problem, where largely molecular technologies have not as yet been deployed, if we just think about the community setting, going to a general practitioner or going to a pharmacy, typically at this point infectious diseases are dealt with generally empirically, and we have to think about what the general challenges are around doing that and what that means. And realistically, it means that increased healthcare costs at the treatment stage. It's generally pretty well accepted that median healthcare treatment costs, if you are able to deploy point of care tests, even just in a hospital setting, you can halve the median cost for treatment. But also you're thinking about how can we actually respond to global challenges like AMR without appropriate diagnostic tools synergizing with drug development alongside that. And then why exactly, where do we fit into this? And that's largely in terms of the fact that what we're offering is a technology that's centered around a novel molecular primer sets. And in a sense, these allow us to identify pathogens significantly faster than your classic gold standard technologies, which include qPCR or other alternatives of that nature. And so based on the laboratory and clinical evidence that we have to date, we are able to effectively identify particular pathogens significantly more quickly on clinical samples than current technologies can. So our clinical data is all sub 15 minutes, and also in terms of a vision for what this platform enables, it would allow you to be able to identify over 20 pathogens simultaneously in one run, and also do so in any sample medium. At the moment, we tend to be working with swabs, but this is purely to prove how the potential for this platform and how powerful that is. And this is just a quick slide on our kind of proof of principle milestones with regard to the molecular primer sets. So at the top, obviously, we see the sort of qPCR level, and typically these kinds of devices are housed in often decentralized testing labs in hospitals or more general pathology laboratories, and typically have at their fastest around a 45-minute to 1 hour runtime on a device of that nature. And these are running with classic sort of PCR techniques. In the middle, we have sort of standard primer sets that are using isothermal amplification, which is the technology that we've selected and optimized quite heavily. And even against that, we're still significantly faster. I think the key message really is that our primer sets and our kind of core company competency in that area is such that we're actually able to identify pathogens, and certainly just those on this list as an example, up to 4 times faster than on the gold standard techniques. But not only that, our vision really is to improve the provision of a kind of syndromic testing outlook. And what we mean by that is, say, looking at, say, just a urinary tract infection or a cough, and being able to then make very serious clinical decisions based on that, rather than just testing for, say, a limited number of pathogens. We want to aim to be categorical, and as a result, your test is only as fast as your slowest pathogen, in effect. So, for example, with the original primers, the slowest pathogen there is about 40 minutes to actually getting a result, which is a huge limitation on current technologies in actually deploying really, really fast syndromic testing. And in terms of what the model is, I mean, obviously, as I'm sure you're all aware, there are a lot of point-of-care diagnostics companies out there. There's no question of that. And for me, a lot of the models around that are a bit broken. Nobody's waiting for a company like this to come out with the next best box, because you just end up with a lab full of 10 different boxes for 10 different tests. This just isn't going to work. So realistically, the future for a company like this, and this is our strategy, is to look at co-development partnerships with key multinationals in our space. This is something that we're already engaged in, and we've been in early stage discussions with a couple of interested multinational partners in the diagnostic space in order to assess this opportunity, and they're looking to follow our progress as we grow, and we would want to partner with them going forward. Now, what that looks like is obviously relatively flexible to an extent, in that obviously these different companies will have different priorities that might be perhaps outside what we're currently testing. But this is actually pretty significant because our in-house milestones in the company are unchanged. And what do we think we're going to be able to deliver against this plan? We have a really, really high-class team, not only in terms of our full-time research team with obviously my colleagues Irina and George who have experience developing diagnostic devices, but not only that, are able to translate a lot of the sort of molecular innovations towards also synchronizing with the microfluidics that are required for technology of this nature, with my experience generally being in sort of startup modeling and strategy, moving through to our clinical advisors spanning both respiratory health, which is where our initial focus is as a case study, and also in primary care, because it's immensely important in terms of how we revolutionize how we diagnose and treat with a new diagnostic test technology, is actually how you move that into the community setting. And then on our board, we have, so for example, Meinhard has significant experience with Roche, and across the whole board, there's a significant amount of experience in delivery at the major medtech players. And then we also have professors in both molecular biology and engineering on our board to add the sort of clout and advisory work that we need for our technology. And just as an example in terms of what the market looks like and what the possible returns could be, we just take a case study of our initial syndromic area of interest, which is acute cough testing. So if we look at the US, for example, we foresee a $1.3 billion opportunity, and that's because every winter 44 million Americans will go into an emergency room or will go to their private doctor with acute cough symptoms, and 80 to 100% of them are swab tested. Now, largely those are either used for screening purposes on duplex or triplex antigen-based tests, which really just tell you if you've got influenza A or B, which is not terribly clinically useful in terms of actually ruling anything out or making a much more advanced clinical decision. Or alternatively, these are sent through to a lab, and typically in the lab, it's going to take at least 3 days to come back with a result, by which time, certainly in acute cough, where many infections are self-limiting, it's completely useless. So actually, and the reason this market in particular is really interesting is because it's one where there are clear and existing reimbursement and regulatory pathways for a device of this nature, which significantly de-risk any potential commercial roadmap, albeit our priority with regard to commercialization is to do so with a partner that already has devices in the field or is already coming to us with this kind of presence. So in terms of what a hypothetical device would look like, this is what our technology could create. Essentially, the first kind of community point of care test that could do syndromic testing, which is significantly different to what's currently out there, which is largely reliant on, as I mentioned, duplex or triplex tests, which are really fast, but they're sacrificing accuracy for speed, and also the lack of coverage is a problem as well, alongside the challenge of laboratory testing, which I'm sure we're largely familiar with. So the real priority for a panel like this is to actually make serious clinical decisions either during a consultation or in a waiting room protocol in or around a pharmacy or primary care environment, or one where the device is capable of sending a text message through directly to the patient, in the sense that it would be Internet of Things enabled through its software, so that you can actually rule out things. So the target with an acute cough panel like this would be to get as far as possible to ruling out viral infection, which is actionable. It means that a negative result on the test means something. It means that you have to escalate or look further into it. And in terms of what this would then mean in terms of a healthcare setting, is really delivering whole system healthcare cost savings, in the sense that you can then suddenly screen for infections in the community where you just simply can't at the moment at all, and adding a lot more information and value at that point in the treatment pathway that really isn't there at the moment. As an example, the device, obviously, that we're constructing with this in mind, is one which obviously has to utilize advanced microfluidic technologies, which we've already designed, in order to be something that requires zero sample preparation and doesn't need to be put in a lab. It's an absolute requirement for this kind of technology. and as such is something that could be run within a very, very fast runtime, and certainly within 30 minutes. And then in terms of what the competition is like, so naturally, of course, the diagnostic space does have a lot of significant players. But what's really significant about this is that typically there are only 3 categories of device in the diagnostic space. One is those in the pathology lab, which, as we mentioned, are enormous devices that probably take about 3 hours. They're immensely accurate, but realistically, you're going to have to wait 3 days for your results just based on the administration around carrying that out. In the middle, you have decentralized tests that are carried out in hospital wards. So these are the trailblazers in the form of, say, BioFire's device or QIAGEN's recent investment in StatDX. These are devices that would be on hospital wards and typically have run times of about an hour. They're very accurate. They cover a lot of infections. But realistically speaking, they're never going to be close enough to the patient. And as such, there are going to be delays in and around. They are going to require elements of sample preparation. And then at the bottom end, you have really, really fast duplex and triplex tests. So they're only testing for 2 pathogens really at once, largely. And as a result, they're not as clinically useful as what you really need and what would really make this kind of test actionable. And so we actually sit in potentially with this technology platform in an unusual position in the sense that it opens up a new segment potentially in diagnostics, but also gives us an edge in terms of speed and cost over the existing companies and those in development. And these are just our core milestones in terms of what we would expect to do if we were looking at this ourselves, albeit our core priority throughout the next few years is to focus on strategic alliances because that is the future for commercialization in the diagnostic space. And it just makes absolutely no sense to go after this yourself. And we already have feedback towards achieving that goal. And what we're focused on is at the moment is proving this platform, proving that this is a future for diagnostics. In terms of what we're seeking at the moment, so we're looking for £750,000 to achieve key value inflection points at the end of this year that significantly drive value in the company. And that's the central cornerstone for that is essentially carrying out a pretty significant clinical study using our alpha prototype and full acute cough panel on 100 patient samples to demonstrate the sensitivity, specificity, speed of the device, and applicability into this area. We already have feedback from potential commercial partners that indicates this is essentially what we need in order to prove how powerful our technology is and really shift the value for the company. And I'd like to thank you all for your time, and I'll take any questions.